Welcome, everyone, to Bible Talk Insight. We're wrapping up our journey through quite a book today, Exodus.
It really is a huge text. We're essentially trying to summarize this incredible narrative that's just so central to, well, to understanding the whole Bible.
Exactly. Exodus. The name itself means the going out, right?
Yeah.
It's this foundational story of God delivering his people,
Yeah.
leading them from bondage into freedom.
But it's so much more than just, a historical account. When you look at how Bible scholars approach it, it's seen as this blueprint, God's blueprint for salvation.
Blueprint.
Yeah.
I like that. It reveals God as well as this loving, reliable deliverer, someone you can trust.
Precisely. And the journey itself, from Egypt through the wilderness to Sinai, it really mirrors the Christian life, doesn't it? From being enslaved to sin,
Through God's deliverance.
into this covenant relationship, and ultimately, hopefully, into God's presence. It's all there in miniature.
And it's amazing how it points forward, too. You see themes that connect directly to Christ's mission, even things echoed way later in the book of Revelation. It's like this continuous thread.
It really gives us a framework for understanding God's plan, his covenant relationship with humanity.
Well, we hope you'll find this wrap-up really helpful. And just a reminder, if you want to dive even deeper, we have a lot more detail in our bonus and supplemental episodes here on the Bible Talk Insight podcast, and also over on the Answers from Scripture channel.
That's right. Lots more background and context available there. And for daily encouragement, you can always find us on Facebook. Just search for Bible Talk Insight or Answers from Scripture.
Yeah, definitely check those out. And hey, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to Bible Talk Insight wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps us keep these conversations going.
Okay, so where do we start with such a massive book?
Let's start at the beginning. Section 1. From Bondage to Calling. This covers roughly Exodus chapters 1 through 7. We begin in, well, a pretty dark place.
We do. We find Jacob's descendants in Egypt. Now remember, they initially came welcomed because of Joseph, but centuries pass, and the situation changes dramatically.
The Bible really emphasizes their growth, doesn't it? Exodus 1.7 uses all these verbs. Fruitful, increasing, multiplying, growing exceedingly mighty, filling the land. It's explosive growth.
It is, and it's actually the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham that his descendants would become a great nation, from a small family to this huge multitude.
But this very growth becomes the problem, right? Under this new Pharaoh, this king who did not know Joseph.
Exactly, and Bible scholars suggest this not knowing wasn't just forgetfulness. It was likely a deliberate policy change, a kind of political calculation, maybe even tinged with, spiritual arrogance from the narrative's perspective.
And it leads to this terrible oppression, forced labor, intensified affliction, and then that horrific decree to kill the Hebrew baby boys.
It's brutal. This kind of state-sponsored oppression, the forced labor, the attempt at genocide, it frames Egypt in the narrative as this symbol of opposition to God's will.
But even in that darkness, right out of that death decree, God raises up the deliverer,
Yes.
Moses.
Yes, Moses. And his preservation story is just incredible. Pulled from the water, the name Moshe itself hints at that. That very water meant to destroy his people becomes the means of his rescue.
And what really stands out, thinking about the Bible scholars' insights, is his choice later on. He's raised in Pharaoh's palace, has all this privilege, all this power, but he chooses to suffer with his own people, the enslaved Hebrews.
That choice is absolutely pivotal. It shifts his whole identity away from the Egyptian elite towards the oppressed. And it highlights a key theme, doesn't it? That our trials, the hard choices we face, they aren't just setbacks. Often, they're the very training ground God uses for his purpose.
Yeah, that perspective changes everything. The bondage itself becomes this picture of, well, humanity's deeper slavery to sin, waiting for God's intervention.
And that training, it continues for a long time. Which brings us to that famous scene, the burning bush. God calling the, let's be honest, seemingly unqualified Moses. This is chapters 3 and 4.
Right after he flees Egypt, he spends, 40 years in Midian?
40 years, yeah, just tending sheep, basically in exile. And 40 years in the Bible, that often signals a time of testing, of formation. Well, probably felt like wasted time to Moses.
Just quiet, mundane work.
It was actually essential preparation, learning patience, humility, dependence, things he desperately need.
And then comes this incredible encounter. The bush that burns but isn't, consumed. A real attention getter.
Definitely. And it's here, out in the middle of nowhere, that God reveals his personal name. I am who I am. Which
is just Profound.
It is. And while it speaks to God's eternal nature, his self-existence, Bible scholars really emphasize that I am here is fundamentally relational. It's a covenant name. It carries the promise, I will be with you.
Ah, okay. So it's not just who he is, but his commitment.
Exactly. It confirms his faithfulness to the promises he made way back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's about his trustworthiness, his active presence in history.
But Moses, well, he doesn't exactly jump at the chance, does he? He pushes back. A whole series of excuses.
He really does. First, it's self-doubt. Who am I to do this? Which is understandable, perhaps. And God is patient. He answers each concern, gives him signs, the staff becoming a serpent, the leper's hand, water to blood.
Signs to bolster his confidence, presumably.
You'd think so. But Moses keeps resisting. And his final objection, oh, my Lord, please send someone else. Well, that shifts things. It moves beyond humility into perhaps a lack of trust in God's ability to equip him. Like saying, God, you picked the wrong guy.
And the text says God's anger was kindled there.
It does. It's a powerful lesson running through the Bible, isn't it? God equips those he calls. What he requires is our trust, our surrendered obedience, even when we feel completely inadequate.
And even then, God is gracious. He appoints Aaron, Moses' brother, to be his mouthpiece. It shows God provides. He finds ways, even using teamwork, to overcome individual weaknesses.
But this divine mission, it doesn't exactly start smoothly, does it? Which brings us to chapters 5 through 7, a really rough start, but also divine assurance.
Right. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, deliver God's message, let my people go, and Pharaoh's response. Wow. Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?
That is just dripping with arrogance. Remember, in the Egyptian worldview, Pharaoh was divine, or at least the God's representative on earth. His question isn't just ignorance, it's a flat-out denial of any authority higher than his own.
So Egypt, in this narrative, becomes the ultimate symbol of, like, human pride resisting God.
Absolutely. Willful opposition to the Creator. And the immediate result for the Israelites, it gets worse. Much worse.
Instead of freedom, their workload doubles. Same number of bricks, but now they have to find their own straw. An impossible task.
Totally unsustainable, and you can feel Moses' despair. He cries out to God, why, Lord, why have you done this? You haven't rescued your people at all. It's raw frustration.
And that's such a real moment. Sometimes obedience does seem to make things harder, at least initially.
It does. And the Bible doesn't shy away from that. It shows us that delays, setbacks, increased suffering, they can be part of the process. God's response to Moses isn't an immediate fix, it's reassurance. He basically says, now you will see what I will do. He repeats, I am the Lord, and he grounds everything in those unbreakable covenant promises to the patriarchs.
So the lesson is, trust the promise, even when the circumstances look bleak. The trials aren't canceling the plan. They're actually setting the stage for God to show his power even more dramatically.
Precisely. Which leads us right into section 2. Mighty acts of judgment and redemption. Exodus chapters 7 through 15. This is where God steps onto the world stage in a big way.
The 10 plagues, these are iconic.
And they're not just random disasters. Bible scholars see them as a systematic dismantling of Egypt's religion.
Yeah.
A theological confrontation.
How so? Explain that a bit.
Well, each plague seems targeted at specific Egyptian deities, showing their powerlessness compared to the God of Israel. Take the first plague, the Nile turned to blood.
Okay, the lifeblood of Egypt.
Exactly. It directly challenged gods like Hapi, the Nile god, and Osiris, associated with the Nile and resurrection. God turns their source of life into death, invalidates them right off the bat.
And some scholars even see a kind of poetic justice there, right? The river used to drown Hebrew babies now runs with blood.
That interpretation is certainly compelling. And the pattern continues. The frogs. A judgment on Hecate, the frog-headed goddess of fertility. The gnats or lice, then the flies. Maybe challenging Geb, the earth god. The livestock die. That hits deities like Apis the bull or Hathor the cow goddess.
It's like God is going down the list of their pantheon.
Pretty much. The boils challenge deities of health. The hail challenges sky gods. The locusts, crop gods. The darkness. That was a massive blow against Ra, the sun god, probably the most powerful deity in their cosmology. God just shuts down the sun for 3 days over Egypt.
Systematically showing he has authority over every domain the Egyptians thought their gods controlled.
And crucially, starting with the fourth plague, the flies, the text often makes a distinction. The plagues hit the Egyptians, but not the Israelites over in Goshen.
Ah, drawing a clear line, showing protection for his people.
Yes. Establishing who belongs to whom right in the midst of judgment. Now, we also have to talk about Pharaoh's heart.
Right, the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. That's a tricky concept.
It is. The language shifts subtly. Initially, the text says Pharaoh hardened his own heart. He saw the miracles, he felt the impact, but he actively resisted. He chose defiance.
So he's making a conscious choice against the evidence.
That seems to be the emphasis at first. His own stubbornness, his pride, leads him down this path. But then the language changes and it says God will harden Pharaoh's heart, or God hardened it.
Which sounds like God is forcing him.
Well, one way Bible scholars understand this is not necessarily that God overwrites his free will, but that God, seeing Pharaoh's determined rebellion, allows him to go further down that path. He confirms him in his chosen direction, removing restraint perhaps, using Pharaoh's own hardness as the means to display even greater divine power and judgment. It's a consequence of persistent rejection.
Okay, so it's like Pharaoh digs in his heels, and God says, okay, if that's your choice, I'll use even that resistance to show my glory.
Something like that. And the text is explicit about the purpose. God says, he's doing this so his name may be proclaimed in all the earth. These events weren't just for Egypt or Israel. They were meant as a universal testimony to God's sovereignty.
Which leads us to the climax of the plagues.
Yeah.
The Passover, Exodus 11 and 12. This is so foundational.
Absolutely central. And notice the instructions God gives aren't about military strategy. They're ritualistic, spiritual.
Right, applying the blood of a lamb to the doorposts.
Yes. A spotless lamb. It's an act of faith, identifying with God's provision before the deliverance happens. The angel of death is coming, judgment is real, but there's a way through it.
And it's based on substitution, isn't it? The death of the lamb in place of the firstborn son inside the house.
Exactly. That principle of substitutionary atonement is right there. The lamb dies so the family lives. And later writers, especially in the New Testament, explicitly connect this Passover lamb to Jesus Christ. Paul calls Christ our Passover lamb who has been sacrificed.
The spotless lamb pointing to the sinless Messiah.
Precisely. And even the food they ate that night is symbolic. Unleavened bread.
Bread made without yeast because they had to leave in a hurry.
Partly practical, yes, but yeast or leaven throughout the Bible often symbolizes corruption, decay, sin spreading secretly. So, eating unleavened bread becomes a symbol of purity, of leaving the old life, the leaven of Egypt, behind. It's part of that preparation for a new beginning.
And God commands them to repeat this meal, this story, every year.
Yes. He tells parents to teach their children, what does this ceremony mean to you? It wasn't just history. It was meant to be relived, making the deliverance their own experience, generation after generation, keeping the covenant memory alive.
Such a powerful way to build national identity and faith. Okay, the judgment peaks, the firstborn are spared by the blood, and then comes the actual going out the Red Sea crossing in chapters 13 to 15.
And they're not alone on this journey. God leads them visibly. The pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night.
Wow, imagine seeing that. A constant, tangible sign of God's presence and guidance, leading the way, protecting them from behind when the Egyptians pursue.
But even with that pillar, they end up in what looks like an impossible situation. Trapped. The Red Sea in front, mountains or desert on the sides, and Pharaoh's entire army bearing down on them.
It seems like a strategic disaster. Why lead them there?
The narrative suggests it was deliberate. God orchestrated this impossible scenario so that when deliverance came, there would be absolutely no doubt who was responsible. No human strategy could claim credit.
And Moses' instruction to the terrified people.
Classic. Do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.
Stand still and watch God work.
Yeah.
That takes incredible faith in that moment.
It really does. It's not passive waiting, it's active trust. Confident anticipation that God will act.
And acts, he does. The sea parts, they walk through on dry ground, and then the waters crash back down on the Egyptian army. Complete deliverance, total destruction of the enemy.
It's the definitive act of salvation in the Old Testament narrative, celebrated immediately in that amazing song of Moses and Miriam in chapter 15. And this event echoes throughout the rest of the Bible.
How so?
Well, the destruction of Pharaoh and his army becomes a picture, a type, of God's ultimate victory over all evil. Later prophets, and especially the book of Revelation, look back to the Red Sea as foreshadowing the final defeat of Satan, sin, and death. Think about Revelation 15, the song of Moses and the Lamb sung by those victorious over the beast. It connects right back here.
Wow. Okay, so they're free from Egypt, but the journey's just beginning. Which takes us to section 3, covenant, law, and presence. Exodus chapters 15 through 31. The focus shifts now, right? From rescue to relationship.
Exactly. And the first lesson, Freedom doesn't automatically mean faith. They immediately start grumbling.
Yeah, the school of faith, as some call it. The Red Sea miracle seems forgotten pretty quickly when they run out of water or food.
It's painfully realistic, isn't it? And the Bible includes these complaints about bitter water at Marah, lack of food, lack of water, again at Rephidim, not just as historical notes, but as a warning for us. Paul mentions it in 1 Corinthians 10. Their struggles show how easy it is to trust God for the big rescue, but then doubt him for the daily needs.
So how does God respond to the grumbling?
With provision, but provision that points beyond itself. He provides manna from heaven
This mysterious bread.
and water from a rock. These miracles sustain them physically, yes, but they're loaded with theological significance. Jesus later identifies himself as the true bread of life come down from heaven, referencing the manna. And Paul refers to the water-giving rock that followed them as being Christ, the source of spiritual life.
So God is teaching them, and us, that he is the ultimate sustainer, the source of both physical and spiritual life for our pilgrimage. He deliberately lets their own resources fail so they learn to rely directly on him.
That's a key insight. And interestingly, amidst all this divine intervention, we also see a moment of very practical human wisdom being shared.
You mean Jethro, Moses' father-in-law?
Yeah. Jethro, a Midianite priest, an outsider to the covenant people, sees Moses as burning himself out, trying to judge all the people's disputes himself, and he gives him solid advice. Delegate. Set up a system of judges for smaller matters.
And Moses listens, which says a lot about his humility.
It does. It shows that wisdom and good counsel can come from unexpected places, and godly leaders are willing to learn even from those outside their immediate circle.
That practical structure then kind of clears the way for the big event. The giving of the covenant at Mount Sinai. Exodus 19 and 20. The 10 Commandments.
This is monumental. And notice how God introduces the commandments. He doesn't start with, "You shall not."
Right, he starts with grace.
Exactly. He says, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." Deliverance comes first. Relationship established by grace comes first. Then come the guidelines for living in that relationship.
So obedience isn't about earning salvation. It's the response to salvation already given. It flows from gratitude and love.
That's the ideal, yes. And the commandments themselves, the Hebrew calls them the Aseret Hadaberim, the 10 words or 10 sayings. Thinking of them as words rather than just rules changes the perspective.
How so?
Well, they become less like restrictive laws and more like liberating principles, defining the boundaries for a healthy relationship with God, the first 4, and a healthy community, the last 6. They outline what human flourishing looks like under God's loving care.
Bible scholars often use the analogy of the law being like a mirror, right?
Yes, that's a common one. The law perfectly reflects God's holy standard. When we look into it, we see our flaws, our shortcomings, our sin. It shows us we don't measure up.
But the mirror can't fix the flaws it reveals.
Exactly. It shows us our need for something more, our need for forgiveness, for transformation, for the very grace that God offered before giving the law. In the New Testament view, the law points us to Christ, who is the fulfillment, the telos, the goal and purpose of the law.
Okay, so after the 10 words, we get into more specific laws in Exodus 21 to 23, applying those big principles.
Right. These chapters show how the covenant worked out in everyday life. Laws about servants, property rights, restitution, social justice, even how to treat your enemy's lost ox. It covers the practical stuff.
And it specifically includes protections for the vulnerable, the foreigner, the widow, the orphan. That seems really central.
It is. Justice and mercy, especially for those on the margins, are woven into the fabric of the covenant from the start. Now, we should probably address that tricky law, lex talionis.
An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Yeah, that sounds pretty harsh to modern ears.
It does, but its original purpose, especially when you compare it to other ancient law codes like Hammurabi's, was actually to limit vengeance, not encourage it.
Limited. How?
It established the principle of strict proportionality in legal judgments. Punishment could not exceed the crime. If someone knocked out a tooth, the court couldn't demand their life in return. It prevented escalating blood feuds and personal revenge by setting a maximum equivalent penalty administered by judges, not vigilantes. It was about justice, not cruelty.
Okay, that context is really important. It wasn't a license for personal payback.
No, quite the opposite. It was meant to ensure fairness and prevent excessive retaliation. Of course, like many laws, it was later misinterpreted and misused, which is what Jesus addressed.
And ultimately, the Bible emphasizes that truly living out these laws isn't just about willpower, is it?
No. True obedience, the kind God desires, comes from a changed heart. Later, prophets talk about God taking away a heart of stone and giving a heart of flesh, writing his law on the heart. It's about an internal transformation enabled by God's Spirit that makes us want to walk in his ways.
Which brings us to the formal sealing of this relationship. The covenant ratification ceremony and the tabernacle blueprint in Exodus 24 to 31.
Yeah, this is where the covenant is officially confirmed. There's a meal, a reading of the law, and this ceremony involving blood sprinkled on the altar and on the people.
That sounds intense. What's the significance of the blood?
Blood, in this context, signifies life and also the serious consequences of breaking the covenant. But crucially, the way it's used here, Bible scholars see it pointing forward. It signifies that Israel's ability to keep the covenant and the forgiveness available when they failed ultimately rests on a substitutionary sacrifice foreshadowing Christ's sacrifice.
Wow. So the means of maintaining the relationship is built in from the start.
Yes, and right after the covenant is sealed, what's God's first big instruction?
Let them make a sanctuary for me.
That I may dwell among them. This is huge. God doesn't just want to rescue them and give them laws, he wants to live with them. He desires intimacy, presence, relationship.
And he gives these incredibly detailed plans for the tabernacle.
Astonishingly detailed. Specific materials, dimensions, furnishings. It's an architectural blueprint revealed by God. And the whole structure, built according to the pattern Moses saw on the mountain, served as this amazing visual object lesson.
An object lesson of what?
Of the whole plan of salvation, how sinful people can approach a holy God. You move through the courtyard, the altar for sacrifice, the laver for cleansing, into the holy place with the lampstand, table of showbread, altar of incense, each element rich with meaning.
And then the most holy place, behind the veil.
With the Ark of the Covenant containing the law and topped by the mercy seat, the kapparet in Hebrew, hilasterion in Greek, the place of atonement. This was the focal point, the symbolic spot where God's presence met humanity, where atonement was made. It all points towards reconciliation.
An incredible picture. But this new relationship gets tested almost immediately, doesn't it? Which leads us to our final section, Section 4, Apostasy, Intercession, and Glory. Exodus 32 through 40.
Yes, right after receiving the law and the tabernacle plans, while Moses is still up on the mountain, disaster strikes. The golden calf incident in chapter 32.
What triggered it? Just impatience.
That seems to be the main catalyst mentioned. Moses was gone a long time, 40 days. The people got restless, scared maybe, and they pressure Aaron.
And they revert right back to the kind of idol worship they knew in Egypt, a golden calf.
It's a catastrophic failure, a direct violation of the first two commandments they just agreed to. It shows how fragile faith can be, how quickly fear and a desire for a visible, controllable God can replace trust in the invisible God who just rescued them.
It's a stark reminder that physical freedom doesn't automatically equal spiritual faithfulness.
Absolutely. They traded the living God for a lifeless idol. And idolatry, the Bible consistently teaches, isn't just wrong, it corrupts. It twists our affections, leads us away from real relationship into, well, empty interaction.
And God's reaction is fierce, righteous anger. He's ready to destroy the people and start over with Moses.
He is. But then Moses steps in, and his intercession here is one of the most powerful moments in the book.
He pleads for the people, reminding God of his promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Yes, he appeals to God's own character and covenant faithfulness. But then he goes even further. He says, if you won't forgive them, then blot me out of the book you have written.
He offers his own life, his own standing with God, for the sake of the people.
Incredible selflessness. It makes Moses a powerful type, a foreshadowing of Christ, the ultimate intercessor, who truly did give himself for his people. It's such a contrast to Aaron's weak excuses, trying to blame the people, even claiming the calf just sort of popped out of the fire.
Yeah, Aaron doesn't come off looking great there.
Not at all. So the immediate crisis is averted through Moses' intercession, but the relationship is clearly damaged, which leads Moses to make this profound request in chapter 33.
He wants assurance that God will still go with them.
Yes, but more than that, he prays, show me now your way that I may know you. He's not just asking for directions, he's asking for deeper intimacy, for experiential knowledge of who God really is. Not just knowing about God, but truly knowing him.
And how does God answer that prayer? Show me your glory.
This is stunning. God agrees, but says Moses can't see his face directly and live, so he tucks him in a cleft of the rock and makes his goodness pass before him. And as he passes, God proclaims his name, his character.
What does he say?
The Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness, rebellion, and sin, yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished.
Wow. So God's glory isn't primarily about, like, blinding light or power.
It includes power, yes, but the core revelation, what God chooses to emphasize about his essential nature, is his character. Mercy, grace, patience, love, faithfulness, justice, his goodness. This proclamation is sometimes called the John 3.16 of the Old Testament. It's that foundational to understanding God's heart.
Glory is goodness. That's transformative.
It really is. And this encounter sets up a principle we see echoed in the New Testament, particularly in 2 Corinthians 3.18, that as we behold the Lord's glory, as we contemplate his character revealed in Jesus Christ, we are transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory.
So knowing God, really knowing his character, changes us. Our lives should then reflect that character to the world.
That's the idea. Our witness becomes a reflection of his goodness, his mercy, his faithfulness in our everyday interactions.
Which brings us to the end of the book. The tabernacle is actually built, chapters 35 to 40.
Yes, after the covenant is renewed, the people get to work, and their response now is completely different from the golden calf incident.
How so?
They give willingly, joyfully, generously. Gold, silver, bronze, fine linens, precious stones. The text emphasizes the willing heart of the givers. In fact, they bring so much that Moses has to tell them to stop. They had more than enough.
It's quite a turnaround.
It is. And the construction itself involves specific skilled artisans. Bezalel and Oholiab are named, along with others, including women who were skilled workers. And the text explicitly says they were filled with the Spirit of God, giving them wisdom, understanding, and skill for the work.
So God empowers people with specific gifts to build his dwelling place.
Yes, he equips them for the task he gives them. And a dominant phrase in these final chapters is repetition. They did everything as the Lord had commanded Moses, meticulous obedience to the divine pattern.
And the result of this obedience.
The tabernacle is completed, set up, and consecrated. And then the final verse tells us, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord, the Shekinah, his manifest presence, filled the tabernacle.
God moves in.
He moves in. The book ends not just with instructions or promises, but with the tangible reality of God dwelling among his people. The cloud and fire that led them now rests over the tabernacle, guiding their journey forward. It's this incredible picture of God's faithfulness and his desire fulfilled to be present with his people.
Which, again, points forward, doesn't it? John's gospel says Jesus tabernacled among us.
Exactly. Jesus is the ultimate fulfillment of God dwelling with humanity.
So, looking back at the whole book,
Yeah.
what's the big picture?
The whole journey of Exodus is this amazing cycle, isn't it? From bondage to deliverance, through covenant into God's presence, culminating in his glory dwelling with them. It sets the pattern for God's redemptive work.
And every step of the way, we see these pictures, these types that point ultimately to Jesus.
Absolutely. Jesus is the true deliverer, the ultimate Passover Lamb, the perfect high priest and intercessor, the bread of life, the living water, the embodiment of God's law, and he is Emmanuel, God with us, the true tabernacle. Exodus finds its complete meaning in him.
And this journey isn't just Israel's story, it's ours too, in a spiritual sense.
Yes. We're all on an Exodus journey from bondage to sin towards the promise of eternal life in God's presence.
And the ultimate destination. The book of Revelation picks up this theme.
It does. Revelation 21 describes the New Jerusalem, and the declaration is made. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell literally, tabernacles with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. That's the final Exodus. God's ultimate goal achieved, living with his redeemed people forever.
Wow, what an incredible sweep from slavery in Egypt to eternal presence with God. It really underscores the importance of trusting his promises, walking with him daily, letting his presence guide us.
Following his lead, just as Israel followed the cloud and fire, and looking forward with confidence to that day when we will dwell with him perfectly and forever.
It's truly inspiring. Thank you for walking us through that. And for everyone listening, we really encourage you to keep digging into God's Word. If you found this discussion helpful, please subscribe to Bible Talk Insight. We'd love to continue exploring the Bible with you.
And don't forget those bonus and supplemental episodes for more depth, and join the conversation on our Facebook pages, Bible Talk Insight, or Answers from Scripture for daily encouragement.
Definitely. Okay, as we wrap up, we always like to leave you with something to think about. Based on our discussion, especially Moses asking to see God's glory and being shown his goodness, here's a question.
Since God's glory is revealed most fully in his character, His mercy, grace, patience, love, faithfulness. What specific aspect of that character do you most need God's help to reflect to the world around you as you live out your own Exodus journey towards his eternal presence?
Something to ponder this week. Thanks for joining us on Bible Talk Insight.